We're going to be talking about breakouts. You got to buy these guys now before it is too late. Now, some of them might have already broken out, but I will explain that when I get there. So, Nate, tell me a running back that you think can break out with running back one production in 2024.
Zamir White, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders, set up for a very successful season. Josh Jacobs has moved on. The only competition they've added to that backfield is Dylan Olave out of New Hampshire, who might develop into a pass catching back, but he's coming from a D2 school, so we got some projection to actually getting to that kind of production on the NFL field. So that leaves Zamir White as really the main running back for the Raiders. He survived the draft and is in a really good spot now. Over the last 4 weeks of the season last year, he was the RB9. He averaged 15.2 points per game over that time. And it's not like the Raiders offense is an incredible offense last year. Not that they had a quarterback upgrade this year, but you'd think, hey, Gardner Minshew's there now. He could be a quarterback upgrade. And if nothing else, Aiden O'Connell was going into his second year and showed some promise last year in his starts. So I expect this offense to be the same, if not slightly better than they were over the course of the final couple games last year. Like I said in that time, 15.2 points per game is pretty impressive out of Zamir White. He also averaged 4.7 yards per carry during this spell, which was 14th among running backs with at least 20 carries over the final 4 games. So Zamir White was very productive last to the end of the season, and I expect that productivity to continue, that efficiency to continue. He's the only guy back there, so even if the efficiency drops, the volume should be high. I think Zamir White currently going for a mid-second round pick, and you're going to get someone that has the potential of an RB1 season, a top 12 RB season, but at worst, I think because of the volume that he's going to have, has a floor well within the top 24.
I like that. Luke Getsy comes in. He was with Devontae Adams in Green Bay for a while. Then he was currently with formerly with the Chicago Bears. So, and you know what? Aiden O'Connell, he wasn't terrible last year when he played. If that's who they're going with, he was quarterback 28 last year as a rookie. 12.1 fantasy points per game. So I think things are looking up for Zamir White. I like this call a lot, and I like the value right now as well.
I know you did because you just picked him up in our most recent C2C startup.
Excited.
And I'm a little upset about that. He was in my queue, though I was on the other side of the board, so I knew he wasn't coming back to me.
Yeah, I had to get him when I could. My breakout for this upcoming year, now hear me out on this, it's James Cook. Okay, he already broke out, right? He was running back 12 last year. Yes, he was running back 12. So when I say breakout, I'm thinking he's going into the top 10. And by top 10, I'm talking like the upper half, running back 7 or higher. I think the sky's the limit when you look at what they brought in for him. Competition's not that great. Latavius Murray, he's gone. You got rookie Ray Davis, who is good, but he's still a rookie. Darrington Evans and Frank Gore Jr., UDFA. He's also coming off his best season, 234 carries, 1,122 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think that touchdown number is going to go up too. The older Josh Allen gets, the more that they need to say to him, hey, let's tone it down on the goal line. Give it to your running back. Underrated receiving back too, Nate. 44 catches, 445 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I'm a big James Cook fan. I've kind of turned around on him a little bit.
Same.
And, you know, right now, Nate, Isaiah Pacheco and Jaden Reed, they're right there. You can maybe going Pacheco to James Cook is a bit of an upgrade for you. I think he gets more rushing yards than Pacheco does about the same receiving work. Jaden Reed, if you need to go from a wide receiver to a running back. I did see a trade on Fantasy Calc. Nick Chubb in a third for James Cook.
Easy money if you can make that happen. I mean, I would move Nick Chubb in a second, like a late second.
I mean, and I like Nick Chubb. He's 27. He's coming off that injury. I don't know. And another one, too, a 24 first and a 25 second.
Like a late first and a second.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more near the top of his range, but the production you're getting, it's well worth it. Especially when you look at what the Bills did at the end of last year. Over the last 6 or 7 games, they really ran the ball a lot more. They really changed kind of their approach. And if that continues into this year, the sky is the limit for James Cook.
Nate, let's move on. Let's talk about some wide receivers. Who's a wide receiver you think could break out with wide receiver 1 production in 2024?
Yeah, here is a player that actually has been a top wide receiver before. He's been a top 12 wide receiver before, but it's been a couple years. and I've been talking about him the entire time. But it's been a couple of years, so people have forgotten. Diontae Johnson, who was wide receiver 9 back in 2021, but with finishes in the wide receiver 4 range over the past 2 years, everyone's kind of forgotten about how good Diontae is, despite the fact that that is heavily influenced by the very poor Steelers offense that they put together for the last 2 years. Kenny Pickett was not the answer there, and they figured that out pretty quickly and moved him on to the Philadelphia Eagles so they can, develop him and sell him for a third-round pick or something.
Thanks, Pittsburgh.
Quarterback factory over there. But Diontae Johnson is not the problem. Was not the problem with those offenses. 66 quarterbacks started a game last year. Bryce Young was 63rd in receiver target separation. That team for the Panthers last year could not separate. Well, enter Diontae Johnson, one of the best separators in the game right now. He has been first in the ESPN separation score over the past couple of years. He is so good at getting open, and that's what Bryce Young needs. I think this pairing is really, really good. This is exactly what Bryce Young needed, and Diontae needed a new place to be, new exciting quarterback. He's got that. This is a great match, and I think with Diontae being the number one target in Carolina, Adam Thielen saw 137 targets last year. Now, outside of 2023, Diontae Johnson has seen 140 targets in 3 years in a row. And then last year, when he only played 13 games, he did not see over 100 targets, a little bit because of the games missed, as well as the overall offense kind of falling apart. With all this being said, you now have Diontae, who knows how to get open, is going into a place where he's going to get a ton of volume. His biggest competition is Adam Thielen, another year older, and new rookie Xavier Legette, who, as much as I am very excited about, is still a little raw and is not going to be taking over that wide receiver 1 role.
Jonathan Mingo
is still there. Maybe he develops in going into year 2. They got a lot of fun young talent there, but Diontae is going to be the leader of that offense. I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he could put up top 12 numbers again. It's going to take a little bit from Bryce Young to be able to do that, but I think he has that potential. I think he should absolutely be a wide receiver 2 next year, top 24 guy, and you can get him for a mid-second. I would like to move a guy like Christian Watson, Adonai Mitchell for Diontae Johnson. Do I need to add a third on top of that? I'm fine making that happen if I need to.
If I had Diontae and you wanted him, I would probably be looking elsewhere. I mean, I understand why you would want to move those players for Diontae, but if I'm the Diontae owner, I would rather keep Diontae than get those two guys. But I'm sure there's someone, because you're so easy to trade with. There's someone else that we could find. The 204 is a good starting point, I think.
Yeah.
But I do think Diontae Johnson's going to have a great season. I think he needed to change his scenery. Bryce Young needed somebody. Let's move on. And I'm going to tell you about Chris Olave. I think this is the time, man. Could this be the third-year breakout that in the past we've discussed? That seems to be a thing of the past at this point, doesn't it, Nate? We don't see that happening as frequently. Guys are breaking sooner than that. And Nico Collins is a great example. Back-to-back seasons over 1,000 yards, Nate. 257 career targets. I mean, if you look at what this guy's done, and this is on a team that has not been super good, 119 targets in 22, 138 last year. And then in 22, 72 catches, 1,042 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. 87 catches, 1,123 and 5 touchdowns. So we're talking another guy. He's improving every year. I think it's time for him to step it up. He's also valued around players like Brandon Ayuk, Chris Godwin. And I saw a trade on Fantasy Calc, a 24 first and 225 thirds.
That seems too easy.
Sign me up for that. I will take that. I mean, I would do a 24 first and a 24 second to get Chris Olave too. To be honest with you, I'd ask for a little something in return. Nate, give me another wide receiver.
All right. How about Michael Pittman Jr., wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts? We're hearing lots of good things come out of Indianapolis about AR, Anthony Richardson, and his progression as a quarterback under Shane Steichen. Sounds, we know the physical attributes are there. There's been a lot of positives coming out about his processing, his learning of the playbook, things like that. Now, I still have to see it. Always talked about a very small sample size with AR, but when he has been on the field, he has been electric. He has been productive. Michael Pittman Jr. is the wide receiver 1 there. I know Josh Downs there. Adonai Mitchell just got drafted there. So maybe his value has dipped a little bit as more competition has come into that wide receiver room, but I'm not worried about it, Mike, because Michael Pittman Jr. had the 4th highest target share last year and ran a route on 100% of Indianapolis's pass plays. He's averaging 142 targets over the past 3 years, had 156 targets last year. this guy is one of the most consistent target getters in the entire league. And he hasn't scored a lot of touchdowns, unfortunately, despite his size. He hasn't been used down the field a lot, despite his ability to make that happen. I think AR changes those two things. We start to see Michael Pittman Jr. used down the field a bit more. We start seeing him score more touchdowns, only 4 touchdowns last year and the year before that. There is still progression for Michael Pittman Jr., despite already hitting up really good numbers with his targets, his volume. I think that Michael Pittman Jr., while he has kind of like Chris Olave already performed really, really well, there is a potential for him to have a further breakout, even with the competition at it, because I don't think Adonai Mitchell comes in here and does too much year one. And even if he does, he's still got to get past Josh Downs to even get that wide receiver 2 spot. And Josh Downs is not any kind of slouch. So Michael Pittman Jr., I would usually say Josh Downs comes on to a team, takes targets. Adonai Mitchell comes on to a team, takes targets. But Michael Pittman Jr. is not going to let that happen. He's still going to be good for 140 plus targets. He has the potential to give us wide receiver 1 numbers, top 12 numbers. I think he has a floor around wide receiver 15. So this is a guy that I think everyone can get excited about, and just got extended with the Colts as well. So he's there long term. You don't have to pay anything too crazy to get Michael Pittman Jr. I think you can probably move a late first for him, maybe like the 109, the 110 to go get Michael Pittman, put him right into your lineup. You get elite numbers from him right away.
I like that a lot. And I think, when you're looking at that back end of the first round, there might be some guys who have a higher ceiling, but it's going to take a few years to reach those higher ceilings. We're talking about Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy. Brock Bowers is like hovering around the 108 right now. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like out there in Las Vegas, but I don't hate that deal at all. Nate, let's talk about my next breakout, Garrett Wilson. He's got some parallels going back to Chris Olave. He's got back-to-back 1,000-yard season, prime for the third-year breakout. The caveat here, obviously, if Aaron Rodgers starts and plays every game, or even 15 games, I'd say 14, 15 games, Garrett Wilson's set up to be successful.
Yep.
He was wide receiver 26 in 2023 with 12.5 fantasy points per game. And Nate, that's with Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle. Garrett Wilson, another guy that, we liked him. Remember, people, I believe they liked him more than Chris Olave when they were coming out, but, better 22 than 23, 1,103 yards in 22 with 4 touchdowns on 83 catches. And then last year, he actually had more catches, though, less yards, 95 catches, 1,042 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So up a little bit, down a little bit other ways. But I'm still excited to see what can happen with just a healthy and competent Aaron Rodgers back there getting the ball to Garrett Wilson. And Nate, let's talk about some trades here. So what if this is a bigger one, you moved A.J. Brown for Garrett Wilson in a very early 24 second, maybe even push for a late first? Is that something you would consider? A lot of people want to sell A.J. Brown right now.
You're buying A.J. Brown, I think.
I would. No, in this circumstance, I'd be moving A.J. Brown because I'm talking about Garrett Wilson as a breakout.
Yeah, I think if I'm a very competitive team, I think this deal can make sense.
Yes.
But I'm also a big believer in Garrett Wilson. So I have him in the same tier as A.J. Brown, but we have yet to see the actual production be in the same tier as A.J. Brown production.
Yes.
And A.J. Brown is not that old of a wide receiver. I believe he's 27.
A.J. Brown is 26.
Yeah.
And he's signed to the Eagles through 2029.
I as much as I believe in Garrett Wilson, I think that A.J. Brown has somehow become an accessible buy at the top of the wide receiver ranks. So, sure, I'm down for this deal, Mike.
I got another one here, too. You're talking like an early-ish 24 first. His value's still up there. Like Drake London, Garrett Wilson just holding his value. It's going to take like the 106-ish, maybe as high as the 104 for some people. You got to think, do you want one of these rookie wide receivers? Do you want Rome Odunze or do you want Garrett Wilson? Nate, who is a tight end that you think can break out with top 5 tight end production in 2024?
Yeah, Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid is set up for success with the Buffalo Bills. We've talked about how they have redone their offense a little bit this offseason. They moved on from Stephon Diggs. They brought in Joe Brady last year, but he became their offensive coordinator. They switched their team around by the end of the season, a bit more run heavy. We know Joe Brady, when he was in Carolina, liked to spread the ball around to his different wide receivers. The Bills have taken the Kansas City Chief approach to building their offense at this point. They even got rid of their wide receiver one like the Chiefs did. They know that as long as they have a really good quarterback and they have a really good tight end who can create mismatches, if they just have good wide receivers, they don't need great wide receivers. They can win. What that means to me now is that Keon Coleman, he's not the wide receiver, or he might be the wide receiver one, but he's not the receiver one on this team. Khalil Shakir, not the receiver one on this team. Curtis Samuel, not the receiver one on this team. The first name up as a receiver is Dalton Kincaid on this team. And to have a tight end on a top offense that is the number one target, we don't get that very often. It's Mark Andrews, it's Travis Kelce. And I mean, not even Sam Laporta, he's the number 2 target on his team. Okay. Dalton Kincaid has that number 1 target upside on a really good offense. And with that, we could see an absolute explosion. I think top 5 numbers are well within his range. I think he has the possibility of, being the 1, 2, or 3 at the tight end position. I think he's got that kind of upside, especially, if they start using him a bit more in the red zone. He only scored 3 touchdowns last year, I believe. Sam Laporta, who had such a good season, scored like 9 touchdowns. A lot of times that tight end position, the touchdowns are what, have that difference in points per game. Because if you look at the yardage and the receptions, Dalton Kincaid was not that far behind Sam Laporta, similar range to Trey McBride. Both those guys have wide receivers that are really good that they have to deal with. Dalton Kincaid does not. So I love Dalton Kincaid as a tight end that's going to break out this year, hold his value for a long time. Can I move a late first for Dalton Kincaid? I know Brock Bowers is going around the 108. I have them ranked somewhat similarly, I would say. As much as I love Brock Bowers, I think Dalton Kincaid and his talent, while maybe is not quite as talented as Brock Bowers, his situation is so great. I do have them ranked pretty evenly. And if I'm a competitive team, I'm going to lean Dalton Kincaid. I think that production comes this year. So anywhere for the 108, 110, I think that's where I'm trying to target with Dalton Kincaid.
My guy, hey, I've been talking about him for a minute. Jake Ferguson, Dak's number 2 target. Who else do they have to throw the ball to? You want to take a stab at this one, Nate?
Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, Ryan Flournoy.
Oh, yeah, Ryan Flournoy is down there. Kavontae Turpin, who I know people are high on, but I think he's more like a
special teams
guy. But after that, it's not really a ton. Jalen Cropper, I forgot he was down there.
Fresno State.
Ezekiel Elliott is back.
Rico Dowdle is there.
Royce Freeman. That being said, I do think everything is set up for Jake Ferguson to be the number 2 target for Dak, and he should be. He was really good last year. I thought he acquitted himself very well. He was tight end 9 last year. 71 catches, 761 yards, and 5 touchdowns, 10.4 fantasy points per game. There's no reason to think he can't be a 1,000-yard tight end this year. In that offense that throws the ball around a lot, I don't know what Zeke's going to look like. We haven't seen a full season of Rico Dowdle. I guess Deuce Vaughn season's never going to happen. So right now, can I get Jake Ferguson? What were you paying for what's his face again? The guy in Buffalo?
108, 110, late first. I think you can get Jake Ferguson for like an early second.
I think I would start at the most the 111 to the 202 is the range that I want to start in to get Jake Ferguson.
Wow. I think that's well within your possibilities. I think you probably can move 202, 204, somewhere around there for Jake Ferguson, especially if, someone has some tight end depth. People still think, hey, tight ends are easier to replace than they used to be, but it's still really nice to have a top one because it drops off pretty quick.
Nate, let's talk about a quarterback that you believe can break out with quarterback 1 production in 2024.
And that is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, the first overall pick a couple years ago, one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in college when he was at Clemson. And all he has done the past 2 years is put up quarterback 12 number points per game, quarterback 13 numbers in points per game, average about 17 and a half, 18 points per game.
And
he's been productive. People don't want him though. He's going to get a contract extension at some point once he's eligible. He's a guy that's going to be down there as the quarterback and face of the franchise for a long time. And they're investing into him. They did let Calvin Ridley walk, but then they replaced him with a first rounder in Brian Thomas Jr. We're still big fans of Christian Kirk around here. Evan Ingram quietly was one of the most productive tight ends last year. They got Travis Etienne back there. This team still kind of finding its feet after having to kind of pull everything back together after Urban Meyer. But Trevor Lawrence is a really good quarterback. Maybe he doesn't have top 5 upside because he doesn't run a lot. But he's also a guy that has thrown 46 touchdown passes over the last 2 years, And I think we're going to start seeing Trevor Lawrence hit that 30 number in touchdowns. Will it be quite this year? I think he'll get close, but he might need a second year from Brian Thomas before he's throwing numbers like that. But I do think that this offense is continuing to improve. Trevor Lawrence is someone that also holds value really, really well. He's going to continue to be the starter there, continue to be productive. His floor of being a very high quarterback too, I think, is a great floor. And he has that upside to get into that top 12, get into that top 10, and be someone that can win you your weeks. So I think Trevor Lawrence he's underrated right now. I just want to point out the fact that, while he hasn't officially broken out, he's put up great numbers through the past 2 years. I don't know why we're not excited about him. If some of these other quarterbacks, any other quarterback in his draft class had done anything close to him, you guys would be ecstatic.
Yeah.
And none of them did anything close to what Trevor Lawrence has done so far. Justin Fields, you could say, in points per game, but he's now the backup behind Russell Wilson, who was cut from the Denver Broncos, and they ate like $90 million in dead cap. I like Justin Fields too, friends, but Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback out of that draft class, and he's going to be there for a while. I'm all in on Trevor Lawrence, who I think you can get right now for, say, the 106, the 107. There's probably quarterbacks on the board at that point. I prefer Trevor Lawrence to all the quarterbacks after Caleb Williams. Even Drake May, I love the upside of Drake May, but I know what I'm getting with Trevor Lawrence. I'm pretty happy with that as well.
My guy is Kyler Murray, second season in this offense, and his first one fully healthy. So look, you could be in the classroom or whatever, but if you're not actually out there running the offense, it's kind of hard to really get a grasp on it, to connect with your guys. There's some new guys that came in. Michael Wilson was a draft pick last year. Trey McBride. Kyler Murray missed a lot of time with those guys in the offseason recovering from an injury. He gets that this year. I think it's going to be beneficial to him. He was quarterback 27 last year. But did you know that he was quarterback 9 in fantasy points per game, ahead of players such as CJ Stroud and Patrick Mahomes? Now, I understand that this is a smaller sample size, but it just shows you that when Kyler Murray is on the field and on his game, he is an extremely productive fantasy quarterback.
And that's coming off the injury, Mike.
It's coming off the injury. I also want to just use that to point out to people, let's not always chase names. You want CJ Stroud? I get it. I want CJ Stroud too on my fantasy roster, not in any other way. But don't always chase the name. Look at fantasy points per game. Sit down, break it down, because sometimes the best option may not be the one that you want. And Nate, I think right now you can get a player like Kyler Murray for a 24 first. Maybe might have to throw like a 25 projected late second on top of it. Maybe you could just do it for, what do you think, the 109?
I think the 109 in a second gets you in the conversation. You might have to do a little bit more than that just because it's a established quarterback. He's got the long-term contract extension. Depends on if there's a quarterback available at the 109 that the person would want. But I think you're getting close to the value there. I don't have a really good pulse on Kyler Murray's value because I think he's undervalued. But I don't think people are necessarily sleeping as much on him, especially since Marvin Harrison Jr. went there. They understand that that's a good situation.
And he's oddly enough valued right around Garrett Wilson right now, who I was talking about before. And, another one, if you wanted to flip it, maybe a 24 second early and a 25 first. Don't forget to make your free Discord trial for 1 week happen. Patreon.com/Dynasty Round. We would love to see you there. But until next time, Nate, I'm Mike, your host. We'll see you next time, everybody.